We've recently been given a blueprint by Tesla, and the blueprint is for converting Earth to sustainable energy. And there's a lot of confusion around their numbers, which is, you could have guessed that that would have happened, but it makes a lot of sense. The way the current energy system is set up, there's a few things that are evident. First one is a lot of the utilization of fossil fuels is emitted as waste heat. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in the actual system that we use now, and it costs a lot of money to maintain. So there's annual subsidies to maintain the fossil fuel industry that would be above and beyond what it would take to complete the build out of solar, wind, and batteries to get to 100% capacity. So this is meaning that the numbers that exist right now are technically inaccurate because you have to include the waste heat into that calculation, and most people don't. So if you create a more efficient process, which is the storage piece, you're able to avoid a lot of these inefficiencies where people are like, oh, we need to cover all the use of fossil fuel per kilowatt, all the way, and, match it 1-to-1. No, it's about, you bring it down about here, about 65%, 60% of what's being used now to calculate for that waste heat. So it turned out that, 140 terawatt hours of storage and 30 terawatt hours of solar and wind is sufficient to get us to 100%. And then also mentioning like a conversion of each piece of the fossil fuel industry. So we're talking power, electricity, transportation, high temp industrial, including incorporating hydrogen into the mix, ships and planes, the entire piece. So, and this is specifically for energy because there are fossil fuels that are used for other things like materials and plastics and such. And that's a different story, but that's being attacked too. So just pay attention. Like things like hemp molecules can completely disrupt that. So what we're actually saying is knowing that individuals like Tony Seba, Peter Diamandis, Ramez Nam out of Singularity University, Kathy Wood out of ARK Invest have been predicting this exponential increase in the cumulative build out of solar and wind and predicting the price declines over time. They've all been arguing for overcapacity. So it wasn't really clear how we were going to get there. And now what Tesla has done is built a blueprint to get actually to 100% capacity, where the argument for zero marginal cost abundant energy is to go between 400 and 600% capacity. And there's a lot of data on that through Rethink Humanity, which is a part of Tony Seba's outfit. So it's vitally important to remember that when we're discussing energy in terms of efficiency, that fossil fuels really don't account for that at all. It's just a base. It's like this is what we need to get to where we are right now. And a lot of people just don't include the inefficiencies and the waste that are created by that. So my thought is we're going to continue to see price declines in both solar and wind, and an accelerated price decline in batteries, which is going to enable the replacement of these fossil fuel power plants one at a time. And the procurement, planning, and installation schedules are varied based on the project for grid scale storage and solar and wind build outs. So we have to keep in mind that there's still a lot of red tape that can either slow the process down or speed it up. Also keep in mind that policy is shifting towards creating a playing field that would make wind and solar, with the addition of batteries, focus of how we create our energy. And this is starting to spread across the globe because we start to see places like Europe saying they're going to ban internal combustion engines by 2035. California also did that. And now they're adding in hybrids. So it's like hybrids are no good because it still has an internal combustion engine. So they're voiding out possibility of buying an internal combustion engine in addition to subsidizing solar and wind. So at a certain point, like we've seen with all electronics, the subsidies won't be necessary because to get accurate calculations, you have to back out the subsidies every time. And when we take into account, learning curves, economies of scale, Wright's law, which is for every cumulative doubling of production, each unit decreases in cost by X amount. And currently drivetrains for electric vehicles are decreasing at 28% per cumulative double. And we've seen quite a few of those in the last 4 years alone for cumulative doublings of global electric vehicle production. So not just one company, but across the globe. And what this is saying is the biggest cost of an electric vehicle is the drivetrain, and that is subject to zero marginal cost economics. So if we're able to not only reduce the costs of the components going into the manufacturing, but also innovate the manufacturing process itself, we're able to get these synergies within expenditures in a company that at the other end is giving a higher quality product for much less cost. And this is by incorporating the innovation into the end product and the manufacturing process of it. So we want to get to a point where, incentives for solar and wind are instant rebates rather than tax credits, because then more people can afford to participate. And then we also want to focus on the manufacturing piece of batteries and electric vehicle drivetrains, because the solar and wind industries are expanding on their own and reaching, price parity with a number of things across the globe in different areas for different reasons. So, for example, in Australia, construction companies are using solar panels as structural components. So, like where it would have been wood before, you can get solar panels for less than that and be able to, provide a solid, strong structure for your home. So the idea is continued production. So cumulative doubling of solar panels also will reduce the cost per solar panel by X amount. And I believe that's 23% for every cumulative doubling right now. So that's going to continue to decrease in price for materials. The entire chain across the solar installation of a project will also continue to innovate and eliminate processes and, bring the end price, or the price for the end consumer down over time. And this is being done by companies, right? Where in the future, I believe governments will say, let's make this easier for people to participate. And they can do that by initiating, price ceilings on utility companies per kilowatt hour for their customers, and then bring that down over time. So really, we're not at the point yet where price per kilowatt hour is coming down here in America. It is happening in other areas of the world, and it will happen here because this disruption is massive, and the utility industry is going to be flipped on its head this decade. And it's all going to be done through efficiency, software, and storage. And that's really something that people need to start understanding, because you're removing the human element out of procurement and management of electricity loads. And that's going to be very, very important with all these smart technologies coming into the picture. Another thing that's going on is the ability to create new business models out of the disruption that's happening now. During Tesla's Investor Day presentation, they mentioned one piece. Like in Texas has its own grid. So any of the connections that are coming in from other areas of the country are for procurement purposes only, meaning they buy wholesale. But that's decreasing over time substantially, because Texas built out wind farms over the past decade, and most of that was built out by oil barons, because Houston's the oil capital of America for sure. And what that has done is produce a glut of wind power that's not being, the grid. So Tesla purchased a piece of that wind power, will offer a opportunity for Tesla owners in Texas. I think it's coming in July, to receive unlimited nighttime charging for $30 a month. So it's a coordination between the customer, Tesla, and the utilities and the grid operator. So when you're plugging your EV in at night, that's not going to go toward your utility. You're just going to pay $30 to Tesla, and any kilowatt hours that are used at night for your car will not be counted on your utility bill. So what this does is lower the cost of ownership for people who own Tesla. So if you can get $30 a month unlimited nighttime charging, that's going to reduce the cost of ownership by at least $170 per month, because a lot of the overnight charging is less expensive, but if it accumulates on your utility bill, then it's going to be $200 plus per month, possibly way more than that, depending on how much you drive. So lowering the cost of ownership is key here. And there's two ways that Tesla's doing that right now: insurance, and then this nighttime charging piece that's about to come out. So they're innovating on a high level because they know their cars are safer. And it's not just the autonomous software, it's the handling, it's the centered balance, because the battery, keeps the car from, tilting to. So it's just solid. The handling's much better, and all these extra safety mechanisms just add to that. So yes, Teslas do get in accidents, and yes, there are some really unfortunate incidences that have happened, but the key is, can it be safer than what we have now? Because most people don't realize that 1.2 million people perish in automobile accidents around the globe every year. And here in America, it's hundreds of thousands. So it's one of the worst cancers that exists today. And if we can get to the point where the cost of ownership is just reduced to $30 a month for charging, $30 a month for charging, cheap insurance, and then low payments on the car. I mean, it's all over. And this is not even including if the autonomous piece comes out. Because if the autonomous piece comes out, that's going to eliminate car ownership over time. And because it's going to be a lot cheaper to get a ride than to own a ride. Because you don't have to pay insurance. You don't have to pay for charging. You don't have to pay for parking. You don't have to pay for maintenance. It's a completely different offering. And a lot of people have given up cars currently for Uber and Lyft, because it's cheaper than taxi. So there's already a threshold that's been reached. You cut that in half or into a third of the cost for people, they're going to be using it more than all Uber and Lyft and taxi combined early. So just another thing to keep in mind. And thinking about it into the next paradigm, like removing the pressures off of people to get services they need, including transportation, is going to shift everybody into a new paradigm, whether they realize it or not. So if they still want to own a gas guzzling, car from the 90s, like a Pontiac or something, they're going to pay heavily for that, because it's not just going to be the gas, the maintenance, the insurance. There's going to be carbon taxes on the emissions. There's going to be regulations that don't allow manual driving in certain areas. There's going to be all kinds of things that are going to go against owning a car, specifically a gas engine vehicle. So the idea here is to create a system where continuously eliminating cost for necessities for people through these innovation platforms that I'll discuss in another video that are taking us into the next paradigm. And there's multiple innovation platforms. The last time we've seen something like this was over 100 years ago, when we had telephone, automobile, and electricity. So these three platforms got us to where we are now. And now we're at 5 innovating, right? So 5 platforms are beginning to expand right now. Just in a nutshell, those are robotics, genome sequencing, blockchain, energy storage, and artificial intelligence. So these 5 together, as they innovate, companies start to grab onto one piece and innovate themselves. It intersects with another one of these, and then they converge it. And then it's like, whoa, it expands the scope. So for instance, Tesla is converging 3 of these together: robotics, energy storage, and artificial intelligence. And that's going to accelerate all of them and make it just like, for consumers, it's like, there's no way that's possible. And it will enable Tesla to say, Tesla one time has provided an over-the-air update that increased range on all vehicles that had already been produced by 5%. And that's just by changing the software parameters to make the car more efficient. So people need to realize this, is that you play around with the numbers a little bit and you extend the range, or you extend the capability, you extend the, customizability. So this is completely disruptive. And I even believe that at a certain point, Tesla will be able to do that again. And with all existing, just by changing the software, and aided by AI, they can identify other areas in which they can improve. So when you start to converge these platforms together, it opens up an opportunity space that is massively disruptive for all existing industries, even if they've already merged with AI themselves. So it's like we have to partition the thought process to say, are there any innovation platforms, the 5 that I mentioned here in this strategy, as it converge with anything else? And what's the scope of the convergence? Because it's not just the development within the individual silo of that innovation platform. Even though that continues at a rapid rate, It's the convergence of these technologies together that creates a possibility space that is endless. Closing thought here is getting where we're headed. So it's like, where are we headed? And a lot of people who don't recognize change or kind of, participate in the change without knowing it, which is a lot of people, they take these advancements for granted. And I think that's a good thing, because if they're unconsciously participating in it, it means that their energy is aware of it, whether their mind is or not. The pace of innovation is like completely accelerating, and a lot of us just aren't paying attention to it. So paying attention is a very good thing. And always, anything that you're using now, just go see what the meat and potatoes of it, and see if there's any innovation platforms in it, and see if there's any convergences. And if you're able to identify that, you'll know that you're on the track to an exponential curve that's about to hit. And it's like, oh, okay. But then you supplement yourself. So you augment your abilities by participating in these things. So I'll get way into depth later on it, but that's kind of the thought process that's going through my mind today. And with that, drop a